From 2014 to 2019, we saw one property type in one zone of Calgary go down as much as $70,000. So I'm gonna share what happened. I'm gonna show you what you can do in the future because the market is changing and we don't know fully what we're walking into. Like you, the Calgary real estate market likes to have a rhythm. It likes to have a flow. You know, you might like to have oatmeal in the morning, and when you don't get your oatmeal in the morning, the day kind of seems off. Well, 2014, 2015, compared to 2022 and 24, the reasons that the market have gone up are very different, and that's not what we're talking about today. What we're gonna show you is looking at numbers of the zones of the city and talking about what areas, what product types basically held their value the best over the 5 or so years, and what we could see or what we can kind of extrapolate from that data and kind of put forward to what could happen in the future. So we're gonna break this into 3 areas: where I was wrong, where I was right, and where I was surprised. So let's go. The first thing that I did here is I pulled a ton of data from April to June so I basically took the median numbers for those months all the way from 2013 up to 2024. I looked at zones, I looked at property types, I looked at the surrounding cities as well, and I got so much to share. So I just want to jump in and share this with you. And as you can see, we have a ton of data. This is all the information for detached and semi-detached properties in all of the zones, broken out from 2013 to 2014 between April to June of each year. Why did we choose April to June? Well, spring market usually is kind of in the swing, or it's just at the end of it, and prices have increased if they're going to increase that year, because it does typically happen around springtime. So we did that because then we can also include all of 2024 numbers as well. That's a big part of it. So here's all the information, and I am going to share with you a few things where I was actually wrong. I have been giving some advice over the years, sometimes on video, but it's been, over the last number of years, because I wasn't pulling data like this, for all of these videos. Let's say 5 years ago, I was giving this information, and I still, in my gut, thought it was true, but I was wrong. So let me show you what this is. For detached and semi-detached properties in 2014, 2015, all the way to 2019, most areas, actually all areas, lost value. So we had a period of decrease in the city. And let me show you what that looks like. On this chart, quite quickly, all of the zones and where they have lost. The largest decrease in that time frame was 12% in the Northeast, 8% in the Southeast. But I don't love percentages in this scenario. I want to talk about dollars. I want to talk about actual dollar values. So where we saw the largest loss in values, in dollar numbers, was in the West zone for detached and semi-detached properties. They lost $40,000 over that time frame, and the East zone lost $41,000. Now, where was the best? Well, the best of the worst. The best places that lost the least amount was North, Northwest, and Southeast, all around $15,000 to $17,000 losses in those areas. So they actually held their value a lot better than some of the other areas. So you can see in this chart between 2015 to 2019, the North, Northwest, and Southeast zones held their value the most, while West and East decreased the most. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And so when I went to 2020 to 2024, you can see right here, it was kind of the rock bottom, but I'm not counting those numbers necessarily in the losses because it was 2020. And as it climbs out, did all detached and semi-detached zones and property types in all of the city, did they climb the same? Not at all. So the biggest spread, if you would have owned a property from 2013 or 2014 all the way to 2024, if you owned in the Northwest or the West parts of the city, you would have saw a $306,000 increase in the Northwest and $348,000 increase in the West. So now let's talk about townhomes. So in 2014-15 to 2019, the zone that lost the most amount of money was actually the West zone. And you can see that right here. So you can see from 2014 to 2015, they started at the high of about $390,000. And in 2019, it dropped to $320,000. The area that dropped the least amount was the north part of the city, which you can see right here. You can't see the numbers there, but they only lost about $18,000 over the same time frame. Now, when you look at the gains, 2020 to 2024, it is an interesting story. The one zone that increased the least amount was city center at $111,000. But the areas that increased the most from 2020 to 2024 was the Northwest, which has $206,000, and the Northeast, which was $234,000. So it's very interesting because we saw the Northwest and the West go up the most or the biggest spread, and went up the most for detached and semi-detached, but we also saw it for townhomes as well. Now, what about apartments? Condo apartments are always kind of a hard thing in Calgary. They have never really flourished like crazy. And I want to show you something super interesting here. So when you look at all the apartment charts, again, tons of numbers, tons of lines going on in here. But the areas that had the greatest decreases from 2014-15 down to 2019 were plenty of them. The West, North, South, East, Northeast, City Center, they all dropped from 52 to 55,000, and the West was the biggest loser, or it's a throwback to a good show, was the biggest loser of $61,000 drop between that time frame. The place that held its value the most, shockingly enough, was the Northwest, at only a $29,000 decrease. And you can see that right here, where it is a very, very flat line. Now, when it comes to the 2020 to 2024 increases, we ended up seeing something very similar to the townhouses, where the city center actually gained the least amount of money, right? They gained the least. So city center, look how flat that is as well. Here's what's interesting. Some of you who might still own a condo and you bought it back in 2014 are still looking at it, maybe you're downtown, are kind of going, whew, I still can't sell my property for what I need. Because, for example, in 2015, right here, city center, you can see was $330,000. Currently, city center is $330,000. So that kind of begs to question my advice that I used to give. That advice was this. So if you looked at the city and you looked at the rings, it's kind of like a water droplet. The inner city would be the first to go up and the last to go down. And it would kind of have this effect across the whole city. That isn't true. The area, when I'm looking at all of these stats that had the best, the least amount of decreases in detached between 2014 to 2019, Northwest was a part of that. When you look at the most amount that grew for detached and semi-detached, well, the Northwest was a part of that. When you look at townhomes, the biggest areas that grew for townhomes, the Northwest was a part of that. They also had part of the biggest spread for the Northwest for townhomes. When you look at apartments, do you see where I'm going with this? The Northwest had the lowest decrease for all apartments from 2014 to 2019. And when you look at all of these things, I have to say, I'm going to jump to my surprise part now too. I'm surprised that the Northwest is probably the safest zone to own probably any property type, where it has the least amount of decreases and potentially the most amount of increases. So my advice of the city center, the inner city neighborhoods, are the first ones to increase and the last ones to decrease, actually isn't true. I just proved myself wrong. And so I'm sorry if I gave you that advice at some point, because I've never pulled this data before. It was always a gut feeling that I heard from other agents and what you saw, and just kind of doing transactions and what you thought was there. But when you actually look at the dollar amount of what goes up and what goes down, this is now what I believe is true.